All right, so we will jump right into it then. Alrighty, so this is going to be our first part of 3. Let me just make sure I get my chat open so I can see if questions pop up. But today's Red Talk number 1. The hope for today is a general overview of what research is at UCSD and how to access it. Most of today is going to cover research programs. I'm a huge fan of research programs. Why not get paid for the work that you're doing, especially as an undergrad? So we're going to talk about how to tap into funding and using funding versus getting academic credits, what research might look like. Originally, we were supposed to have a wonderful student guest speaker talk about her work because I really want to highlight non-STEM research as well. I think there's a lot of myths about research and that, oh, if you're not a STEM student, you can't access research, which is not true. There's so much being done. And we will have some transfer student talks throughout the rest of these sessions. And please know I have a wonderful guest speaker starting us off for our next session on the 11th. But today is really the basics, some Q&A. Just because it's the basics doesn't mean it's all easy information, but my hope is that to give you some kind of takeaways and some homework to do so that you feel like you can get started on your research journey at your own pace at UCSD. And as I mentioned, all questions are welcome. Please pop them in the chat or unmute as they come up for you. So expectations for today is let's talk FAQs. These are in my past year of being the undergraduate research coordinator, which for those who just joined, I am not in that role anymore, but somebody will be filling that position in the transfer hub shortly. I'm going to talk about some of those questions that came up really often and just give you a general overview for what research at UCSD looks like. And that's a place where we can build off those questions. Number 2 is methods of getting research. So this is going to be where do you apply? Who do you first contact? Because you are so early and just starting off the academic year, we're going to be talking about looking into programs, and we'll talk about some different ways to start. But I like talking about programs. 1, it gets you credits or payment. And 2, it gives you a nice little lead in when you're ready to start emailing professors, which are things we'll talk about in the later sessions. Then I'll give you some time and some tools of where to just get a baseline of what programs exist at UCSD, where to find them, and give you some time to actively browse. And we will do that. And finally, I'll give some times for Q&A at the end. And that is what I have moving forward. So diving into some frequently asked questions. One of the first things that I hear a lot of students come in is, do you have to do research at UCSD? And the answer is kind of a maybe. And where that comes in is it depends on what your requirements are. And these requirements come in from a few different places. I know that this can be a little bit tricky since you probably haven't had communication, your enrollment offices, and maybe you don't know your GEs for your specific college yet. So this might, if we need to do some clarification questions, I'm all ears for that. But the first place what that might make you have to do research or some other type of research like activity is something that your major or your college might have. I know 6 College has this. It's called a HIP requirement, high impact practice. So this can be done. There are some things that count for HIP and that don't. HIP means that you are getting paid for your time doing this activity in academic credits, which we'll come back to a little bit later. But essentially, it's independent study credits. This can be done in a research lab class that's pretty specific, or it can be done just working with a professor to get some hours in. There's a program that we'll dive into a little bit later called the Faculty Mentor Program. And as I mentioned, there are some specific lab classes or internship classes that will help to satisfy this HIP requirement. And this would be one reason why you might have to do research at UCSD. And sometimes this can be done through an internship. For those of you who maybe are a BS in psychology, there are likely some other majors that will have something like this as well. A HIP requirement is usually part of those major degrees. And you'll see that once you see your degree evaluation. Some people call it 199s, some people call it HIP. But at UCSD, a 199 or a 99 credit is something that's not necessarily a classroom activity, but it's you doing something towards your major or area of study that's internship-like or research-like or some independent activity that's moving you towards getting education in your field of study. As I mentioned, there might be a major requirement, or it might be not just your major, but if you're pre-health, for some folks applying to med school, they may have some sort of a research requirement. So it might be that your pre-health has a recommendation or a requirement that you do some research. As I mentioned before, BS in psychology. Again, this can be done in the same ways as we mentioned before. And the final reason why you might have to do research at UCSD is because you want to. You're coming to R1, which is the top of the top research institution, and there's so much research being done here. Maybe it's to build your resume, maybe because you want to go to grad school, or maybe you want to test out what it's like to be a full-time researcher, or you're just excited. I didn't do research until my master's degree, and both my undergrad and my master's are in education. So a lot of that was surveys and data and interviews and focus groups. So know that if you're someone who's less in that STEM world, there's still so much for you to do during your time in undergrad. Any questions here before we move to the next of like why research might be required? Oh, cool. And next is, can you get paid to do research? And if so, how? The answer is yes. It's not necessarily a given. One of the main ways to get paid for your research is to apply to either research scholarships or research programs. That's something we're really going to deep dive into today. Programs are something that can be offered through your college or through different departments. One of the main holders of programs at UCSD is URH. It's called the Undergraduate Research Hub. What their office does is primarily host programs and all of our research scholarships and run those to make sure that if you're working with a professor, then you have the option to do those two, that you have the option to get paid for your time in that. Research scholarships are pretty much the same as programs, and we'll dive a little bit into that later. That was my alarm I just snoozed it instead of stopped it. So research scholarships, we'll think about this in the same way that we think about programs, and we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. Another way that you might get paid for research at UCSD, but it's a little bit more rare, is faculty funding. What that means is sometimes faculty get grants, and that means that when you apply, you send them an email, you ask if you can work in their research group, their lab, doing some publications and things underneath them at UCSD, they might have a grant and they might be able to fund you for a certain amount of money. Those are things that we can talk about, some portals that will be posted on, but a lot of this happens through networking and word of mouth. And it's a bit more rare for undergrads. We'll talk about that a little bit more in our next session, but traditionally, I would say more of the money that faculty are getting tend to go to grad students, but that's not the only possible way. And finally, another way to get paid for your research that you're doing during undergrad is corporate. We are next to a lot of research institutions, as well as a lot of biomedical industry and other just research institutions right here in La Jolla and in San Diego. So you absolutely have the option to tap into those as well. And that's a great way for you to get some paid research opportunity outside of UCSD. And then I'm popping over because I see a couple questions both coming in the chat and the Q&A. So I do see that there's a conflict for the PATH class schedule. We are not collaborative with PATH. We do a couple things in combination with them. So all of these sessions are going to be recorded, and we're going to have a makeup opportunity where we'll have questions embedded throughout where you'll just have to complete some because we want to make sure that you're fully watching the full activity. So we can definitely get back to that and see how we can still wrap you into those sessions, Josiah. And then another question is, are there political science research opportunities? Yes, and we're going to talk about how to find research-specific opportunities for your major later in this presentation during your self-browsing. So a UCSD rule of thumb, it says that you can either be paid or compensated for your research In academic credit, which is units, so those 199s, those 99s that we talked about, or cash. But UCSD says you can't get both at the same time, with some very, very specific exceptions. So some examples, you can latch on to working with a professor who's doing stuff that you are very interested in and stay with them your full 2 years or 3 years as a transfer student. And each quarter, change the way that you're being compensated. For example, fall, you're going to do the late program. You're going to get paid cash. You're going to get paid money to do that. Winter, you apply for programs. You don't get into any. So you say, okay, I'm going to take academic credits and I'm going to satisfy my college's HIP requirement. So you can use the same professor, the same research opportunity to be compensated in different ways. But UCSD says, hey, you can't earn 4 academic credits. You can't satisfy your HIP requirement and get paid $15 an hour, because those are both considered compensation. So that's one rule to keep in mind, and one that as folks are approaching their HIP requirement might be worth, hey, if you need to make money in some capacity, take your HIP requirement as one of your course load, because that's going to take some of your time that you're not able to be paid for. Questions on this logistic? Feeling good? All right. So when do you have to start research? This is the next thing. Is some people already start as a transfer student in fall quarter. You're feeling like you're behind, and you are absolutely not. You are, the fact that you're here, you're ahead of many. I've had folks come to me in their quarter that they're graduating, and we've still been able to figure out some logistical way for them to get connected to research in some capacity. So as I said, there's no rules, but based off of my previous role and getting to work with folks, here are some of my recommendations of maybe some sort of a timeline for you. As you come in fall quarter, a lot of you, the vast majority of you are incoming students. Use that time to network. Go to all of your professors who are specifically in your field of study, your major. Go to their office hours. Talk to your IAs. I can't tell you how many of my students have been able to directly connect to research through their IA. IA is the same as the TA that you might have had at your community college. So these are going to be upper division students who have taken that class before, or it might be grad students. We have instructional assistants and TAs here at UCSD. They might be able to just kind of loop you right into their lab or their research group. And so start that networking process. Today, we're already going to look at some programs and see what programs are of interest. I really recommend getting a kind of programs list on your mind now, because those summer programs, and we have Edgar in the room who's going to talk a little bit more about that, but summer programs come up fast, and summer is really the most bang for your buck in terms of research. You're going to get paid the highest out-of-pocket cash payments. You're going to have the opportunity to do full-time research for 10 weeks, 8 weeks or 10 weeks. Most programs are 10. There's a few that are 8, but it gives you a chance to really test out being a full-time researcher. If that's something that you're interested in, a career in, or a PhD, I really say, like, make sure that summer is your priority, and those applications open as soon as winter quarter. So you don't have to have necessarily a faculty mentor at that point, but hopefully through your networking, you're getting to meet some faculty, you're getting some recommendations and learning what research is around, so that come winter quarter, you're ready to start applying to summer programs. Maybe you're feeling eager and you want to start tapping into some spring things and others as well, but summer is really like the cherry on top of research. Make sure that you're kind of getting your timeline ready, so that if there's a summer program and you're only going to be here for 2 years, you have the chance to apply for that specific summer program. Question I see in the chat: is the academic internship program a way to be compensated in academic credit? So yes, the academic internship program is one way to earn 199 credits that we talked about earlier. So they do compensate in academic credit. They're a funky exception, and they're specialized, especially to international students, because they're one of those weird ones that might be able to give you 199 credits and cash, but usually it's a little bit less of both. So that's a kind of funky one, but yes, you're on the right track. Do professors usually consider incoming transfers? Great question. It really depends professor to professor. Next week, we're going to look into different research groups and talk about research topics groups and see where they all are. And we're gonna do what I call like a green flag scavenger hunt as we look at faculty pages and research groups. I can't give you a definite, this person's going to take you into their group, this person's not, but I have some pretty good ideas of green flags to look for on web pages of labs and of research groups, and say, this one, oh, they have an undergrad in their lab. Oh, they have this. So we can up your chances a little bit by making sure that we're applying to labs and research groups, or working under professors who have a lot of green flags on their site. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit briefly now about methods of accessing research at UCSD. So y'all sound like you're already ahead on some of these. You've mentioned the academic internship program, the Real Portal. We've talked briefly about programs, but programs are run through your college, certain divisions at UCSD, and the Undergraduate Research Hub, which is an office that owns some of the programs, but not all. As we mentioned, programs might pay you in cash or credit, and they can include additional incentives, and that's something to look out for. They might pay for GRE course prep. They might say, hey, if you want to travel and present at a conference, we're going to cover you up to X amount financially. And they might already have pre-established lab connections where they're able to say, hey, here's a faculty in this area of study, and they make that mentorship connection for you. Some other ways besides programs are portals that we have at UCSD. Real and AIP are two great options. These are two, it's kind of like Handshake. So these are like a LinkedIn or a Handshake where opportunities are posted by professors or local research institutions. More so on the Real Portal. Real Portal is really, really tailored into research specific. AIP is a little bit more broad, but sometimes you might apply to a real opportunity and it opens up the application in the AIP and vice versa. So something I like to say about the Real Portal is it's a great supplement. The vast majority of folks, like if you go around and you ask other transfer students, they'll say, oh yeah, the Real Portal is where to get research, which it is one great way, but it shouldn't be the only way that you look, because most professors get a lot of emails. If folks know like the inside clues of how to get research at UCSD, they're emailing professors and they're doing a lot of the things that we're going to talk about in our later two sessions. So they might not even get to a point where they have an opportunity to post on the portal, or by the time it posts on the portal, it might be pre-spoken for. So Real is a great thing. Like you have a long walk to class, you can scroll through on your phone, text yourself some of those great opportunities. This is a great supplement to your research journey, but this shouldn't be the only place that you look for research throughout your time at UCSD, because there's a lot of eyes on a few opportunities. Make sense? Sound good? All right. So tapping into our research programs. We mentioned it briefly before, and we're going to talk about it more in depth in one of the programs that's offered here, but some of the benefits of programs and scholarships. One of the big things is mentorship. A lot of times you might need to bring your own faculty mentor to an application, or you might not have to have it at the application time, but you might need to have it by the start of the program. Sometimes they're provided, but mentorship is usually a key component of a program. A lot of programs will have a deliverable at the end, whether it be a poster presentation or presenting at some sort of a research conference that's housed for UCSD students. There's always a time commitment and a requirement, whether this is, hey, you're going to be full-time for the 10 weeks or 8 weeks this summer, or if it's during the academic year, it's usually 10 to 15 weeks during your academic credit. That's pretty standard. And then there's always some sort of reward and possibly additional incentives. So these are the kind of components you can look through as you begin to look at programs around UCSD and see what do I want to maximize? What feels the most important to me? Rewards are, like we talked about, money or academic credit, and additional incentives can be housing. They can be waiving your grad school application fees and GRE support classes. And then we'll touch back on research scholarships. Something to mention here is scholarships and programs essentially are the same thing, but the funding comes from a different source. So research scholarships tend to come from families, companies, and they tend to have a heartstring to them. Examples might be women's health. There's another one that's specific to engineers. So there tend to be like a heart piece. But essentially what you're going to be doing in a research scholarship, you'll still have all the same components. You'll likely need to have a faculty mentor. There'll still be a deliverable. It's not like a traditional scholarship where you fill out an application, you get the cash, that's the end. So research scholarships, you can think of like a research program. The reason they have different names is because the money comes from different places. All right, any questions on anything we've touched base on so far? All right. So I'm going to go ahead and pass off to Edgar, who is one of my wonderful colleagues here at UCSD, and is going to share a little bit about the UC Leads program. This is one of many programs, but I think it's good to learn about the structure of one of them, and then we'll give you some time to browse through some other research opportunities as well. Edgar, do you want me to stop sharing my screen so you can share yours, or are you speaking mostly to slides here?
Yeah, that's okay, Tessa. You can stop sharing. I'll go ahead and share the website, more than likely.
Perfect.
Thank you, Tessa. Thank you, everyone. Good morning. Hope you're doing well this morning and that you're getting a lot of information that will be helpful for you here in your journey at UCSD. And of course, starting in this fall, and then starting this fall, whoever's continuing. But yeah, I'm here to talk a little bit about UC Leads, which is a research program, and I will be actually sharing in the chat right now my information, the website for the program, and some email addresses for all of you. So feel free to follow along in the website for UC Leads, as I'll be sharing my screen and going through it. But first, I like to briefly describe what UC Leads is, and very similar to what just Tessa said in regards to what a program consists of and what is the structure. Essentially, UC Leads is its unique components of this program is that this is a 2-year program. Potentially, students can do, typically students that are in the program, that is the normal amount of time that they do an average. Some students take a little longer than 2 years. Some other students take less than 2 years. And that all just depends on when the student is onboarded to the program, when they're graduating. But this program is especially designed to support students in STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and math majors, to gain research experience. So the way that this program provides the research experience is that it invites students when they're sophomores to apply to the program, or essentially when they're juniors as well. So either you're a sophomore or junior, we recommend that you apply for the program and that you do this program towards the last year or couple of years of your undergrad experience. And the reason for that is because a lot of the content of this program focuses on also providing you education about what research looks like and in what kinds of environments can you thrive by doing research, right? So what kinds of careers can you pursue? And also, we talk about graduate school. So a lot of our workshops, we focus on whether a career in industry or a career in academia or a career in research, and how those can look like, and what are the requirements for you to continue to pursue those careers, and one of them could be grad school. So there's a lot of different components that our program provides to students that supports them in their journey. Now, very similar to what Tessa said, our program comes with certain items, right? So the first item is we provide summer research experiences. So if the student is onboarded for the 2-year program, the student will do 2 summer research experiences, one here at this campus at UCSD and another one on another UC campus, right? That's how our program is structured. Then each summer, the student gets a stipend, right? So our program provides money for the student for their own expenditures, right? So we pay for the summer internship, for the summer research experience, and then on top of that, we provide the students a stipend. Currently, our stipend sits on $4,000 for 8 weeks of the summer, and that's how our program is structured, right? So Our program applications are not open yet, but they will open in winter of 2024 to onboard the next group of students for the summer of 2024. That's a little bit about the program. If you go on the website, you're going to find essential information there, such as, what are the different eligibility criteria for the program? What are the different components of the program aside from the ones that I just mentioned? And there's the current scholars are there as well, so you can see them. And there's contact information as well. So I wanted to provide that brief overview, Tessa. If you want me to go a little bit more into detail of what the program does for students, I could. And yeah, that would be essentially what I wanted to share with you, and see if you had any questions in regards to the program.
So y'all, any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat, either private messaging to myself or to Edgar. I guess a question, I didn't add this to my FAQs for the presentation itself, but something I hear from transfer students a lot is, I haven't had research experience either at my community college or where I'm transferring from. Am I still going to be like a standout contender if I haven't had research opportunity before?
That is 100% true. There's a question that I also get, Tessa, thank you for bringing it up. So one thing that I like to say is that as a transfer student myself as well, one of the things that I've, when I was back in college, one of the things that I really, really appreciate about transfer students, especially, you all come from an environment where you're looking for information, right? You coming to this meeting right here is proof that you are all looking for opportunities, right? So the main thing that I like to say is apply, right? Apply, consider every single opportunity that you hear from, right? That you could potentially see yourself, that you see yourself as qualified or eligible for it. For UC Leads in particular, we do not require previous research experience. So UC Leads is one of those programs that I would really recommend that you consider if you're eligible for under, the criteria that we set forth in our website. So we do not require any research experience. In fact, that is a population that we are mostly supporting, right? I mean, there's students that our cohort is comprised of students with experience, with no experience, right? But we're interested in seeing how students without research experience that come from the community college can gain this experience through our program. So the answer is we don't require it. And that is a great question, even for you all in this room, to ask the people that are in charge of these programs.
Thank you so much.
Question in the chat, will cognitive science fall into UC Leads? So the answer for what a student in UC Leads that is considered part of a STEM major, what we're interested in, what is the person's name? Gabriella, what we're interested in is essentially whether you're interested or your, general interest in research includes pieces of or is essentially crossing into, if you're cognitive science, if it's crossing into potentially neuroscience, or so we take it on a case by case. You could always send us a question more in detail about what your situation is, and we can always respond to you and tell you if we feel like this would be a program for you. But what we're looking for essentially is that your general interest in research or your general interest in your major kind of leans a little bit more into the hard sciences, such as, essentially neuroscience could be one of them. There are other items that other areas that could be considered also STEM.
Well, thank you so much. This is our first session, so I think there's a lot of information flying out there, and just getting an idea of what programs look like is super, super helpful. I'll give y'all in the group a reason that one of the big reasons I had Edgar come is because one, this is a fantastic program, but this is also one of the first programs that has an exclusive transfer leg to it and has some spots specific to transfer students. And I think that is hopefully something we're going to start seeing more and more of in programs. I know URH is really tending to lean their application towards preferring transfer students as well. So this is a great opportunity. We're going to talk about some other programs as well and see what some of those other components are. But thank you so much for your time. I love UC Leads. It's a great program. And hopefully it's one that is going to be on the table for a lot of you as you consider summer research for this time next year. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Tessa, for inviting me, and thank you, everyone. Feel free to email, and don't be shy. Just go ahead and reach out, and we can always talk via email about this. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. So that was our UC Leads piece. I want to give you all some time to dive into what research can look like. So I'm going to drop some links in the chat. This QR code, if you have your phone handy, it will take you to the same place that first link will. I want to give, let's say, 7 minutes. I think sometimes you go to presentations like these, you learn good stuff, and then maybe you don't think about taking that next step. So I'd really encourage you to go and check out the undergraduate research opportunities that are available here. This is a URH owned website, but it's not exclusive to just their programs. You can filter, you can do a little search here and say, hey, I'm a biochem major, I'm within the biosciences, or give any of these other examples. And this will tie you to appropriate programs available to you. So feel free to browse here. I also linked a website that's a standoff of ours, and it gives you some other ideas of ways to connect with research. So it will tie back to the same programs list. I also have this kind of step-by-step of how to connect with research. A lot of this is going to be what we're doing this deep 3-hour dive into throughout the summer. So you don't have to spend as much time here, but it will give you some clues of what's coming up. So I'll say, go ahead and spend some time here. You can also go to their programs page, and their URS is their scholarships page. But I'll go ahead and set this on your way, and we'll come back together at 11:42. I'll play some music, but feel free, if there's a program you feel excited about, please share them in the chat. Let us know what you're finding, and use this to get some things bookmarked. Have this website ready. So go ahead, and like I said, I'll bring us back at 11:42, and I hope you find some interesting things. If you have questions about like some of the requirements too, feel free to come off mute or ask in the chat, but go ahead and get started. I'll play some chill study music in the back. Is that a good volume for y'all? Or are you hearing it?
We can hear it. It's good enough.
I'm going back to my guys. I'm not inside, but I don't know what's on your mind. So how about that around? See what it's like. Turn it up.
I won't take any music credit either. This is all Spotify's chill playlist. So sorry if we don't like it.
So right off the bat, I go and I filter by, there's no political science field, but social sciences. And I see a few. I mean, like they seem like general, like the LAEP research opportunity. Am I on the right track there?
Ooh, great question coming in the chat. Is research a more common thing for STEM majors? Is it less beneficial or helpful to majors outside of STEM? I'll go ahead and just take a time to answer this. Absolutely not. It is not less beneficial or helpful to social science majors. I will say research just looks very different for y'all in the social science field. I think probably one of my biggest regrets in undergrad is not doing more research, specifically in education. And the thing is, research for social science, it just looks much different. So I think UCSD is a pretty heavily STEM pointed university. We have a great pre-med program that we're known for. We have a great bio program, but we also have really great research going on in other areas. And I'm so bummed that our student presenter is postponing to next week, because she's a great example of somebody who's in like the arts, and her research surrounds theater and music and kind of that effects on folks. But there's great research being done in all of the fields. One place that if you're social science, even if you're not a communications major, comm has really, really great research going on. And they talk about like the media and how certain things shared in the media has negative impacts on different groups. Political science, there's a whole there are 2 or 3 whole institutions within UCSD. Sure, one is data science, but there's also people studying very specific political pieces that have their own little legs to it. So next week, we're going to really dive into research groups, topics, and areas, and we'll talk about where to go on your major page to find faculty research in your area of interest and do a big deep dive. Today, I think programs is important because it's a good way to kind of have a tie-in to how to email professors, and I'm trying to go chronologically. And there are a lot of programs that will support our social science folks as well. But there's so much good use. You might be able to get published as a social science person. You'll really learn how to read research papers and then be able to write them, or do things like literary bibliographies, which are how you would start any big project. So there's so much benefit to social science majors, but it's also not something that you have to do. Maybe you look at, there's so much research being done at UCSD that if you don't find a faculty who's doing research that interests you, you have to keep looking. And it doesn't have to be in your major or your field, but there's a lot of good stuff. And I'll let you have at least one more minute. Sorry, I talked for most of it, but hopefully you'll have these links to come back to.
Did you already cover the real portal?
Oh, sorry, my volume was way down. Do you mind just repeating your question?
Did you already cover the real portal?
I'll go back and touch on it a little bit more in depth. I kind of sped through as I saw that Edgar had shown up for his presentation. So we can go back to the real portal. By show of like virtual thumbs, are y'all feeling like you have a good taste of where to at least look for programs, and we can dive back into the presentation? How are folks feeling? Okay, perfect. So let's go back slides wise to the real portal. So yes, the real portal, and let me make sure that my recording is back up and running as well for folks. Oh, I never paused it. All right, so the real portal is a place, it's almost like a job board. Real is specific to research opportunities versus AIP might have some internships. AIP is very strategic in that you like whoever the supervisor is has to make sure that whatever the internship opportunity is directly relates to study. So you can't be doing like coffee runs. There actually has to be an educational component. And the real portal is very similar, but it's the research experiential research experiential applied learning portal, I think is what the E, I'm not sure of the word, but it's research and applied learning. And I think this is experiential. Don't quote me on that. But it is one great option to look for essentially job postings. They may not be paid opportunities if faculty have an open area either in their research group or on their team. But what I had mentioned about it before is it's a good supplement. You should be doing a lot of what we're going to spend topic 2 and topic 3 of this series talking about, which is reaching out directly to professors, because a lot of people know how to network and get in with professors. So a lot of times folks get research kind of through the back door, which is what we're going to talk about. And then not all opportunities will get to a chance where they post. However, it might be that a faculty has a 5-year funding plan, they have some extra money, so they post a paid opportunity for an undergrad on here to hire someone quick. So it's a good place, but I never recommend these being the only things that you look at. Do you want me to deep dive? I mean, I can't log into it as I'm not a student, but does that give you a good overview of what to expect there?
I feel like I'm going to have to do a deep dive later on.
Okay.
I found the political science page for research opportunities for political science students.
Great.
And one of the items was the real portal. So
yeah,
that.
Some majors use it a little bit more than others. As I mentioned, it's great. I don't want this to be anyone's last shot hope, because it might take a while.
It's just I get confused because my major has data analytics. So do I focus on data science research? Do I focus on, you know what I mean? Or political
absolutely
science?
Yeah, and that's really going to be preference for everyone. It might even be like a lot of folks, you can do research in your area of interest, even if it's not explicitly your major. We had somebody study the negative mental health effects of gambling, and they were a computer science major. Did they do some like computer science pieces to it? Absolutely. But what you study doesn't have to be what your major says. And we can dive more into that later, but it should be your area of passion rather than, and if that aligns with what your major is, that's ideal. You want to be studying and going into a field that's really interesting to you. But it's really preference. I would say, and we'll talk about this next time too, but like looking at parallel areas and just areas that you're interested in, where can you just tap in to options? And then another question I saw come in the chat, is there more opportunities for research than there are for internships? I don't know numbers wise. I don't have access to Handshake as a staff member. So what we're going to talk about next, this week, we're really talking about research programs. Next week, we're going to say, like, really technically, every single faculty at UCSD is a chance to tap into research, because you could be working under any faculty member here. Internships are going to be a great option for folks as well, and internships might have a research component. So numbers wise, I can't give you an answer, but there are plenty of opportunities to do both, and both are great options to build your resume. It just depends kind of what you're looking for and what your interests are, because both are great options for you. Other questions here before we continue? All right. So in terms of this presentation, some things are what's coming next. Next Thursday, the 10th, at same time, same Zoom link. When you registered, you should have gotten the calendar invite to all 3. We're really going to dive into figuring out what research is being done at UCSD. And that's UCSD as a whole. So parts of that are going to be School of Medicine. You can tap into School of Medicine studies. There's also like the Data Science Institute, which I can't pronounce the name of. And that has research within its components. We have a great partnership with Salk if you're someone who's doing psychology or neuroscience or cognitive science. So we're really going to dive into finding all the different research opportunities, whether that be a faculty or a parallel member. And then also looking at different research groups, what to look for, what is a good sign for you as an undergrad. And figuring out what's going to be a good fit and what research topics are of interest to you. That's going to be our focus next week. And then the final session will be Monday, August 21st. And this is how to start contacting professors. So I'm doing this in a strategic way. I want you to have a chance to, if you're emailing professors, how great does it sound to say, hey, Dr. Smith, I love the research you're doing. I'm applying to get funding, so you don't have to pay me from the LAPE program. It's going to help support your case. It's going to give you some benefit, and it also shows them that you're guaranteed to stay for a certain amount of hours a week for 1 or 2 quarters. So this is all going to build up together to get you ready to start sending emails to faculty members and how to do that appropriately. What materials do you need to attach to those? How to make sure that you're writing a really professional and pointed email that's speaking to their research specifically. So that will be more of what we dive into on August 21st. I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll. And this is our first year doing this series. So I want to just make sure that we're getting some idea of what's helpful. And those questions are open for you there. Feel free to also come off of mute and ask questions to me directly, or we can also, I can start addressing some of the questions that I've received in the chat. So we'll use this time to, if y'all can fill out the poll, that would be really helpful. And then I'm going to check the chat here. So first question I see that we haven't answered yet is, if you're unable to attend the later meetings, where will those recordings be? So for all of you who signed up for this, and if y'all have been coming to some of the other talks as well, I always send a follow-up email to everyone who's registered. I'm going to be taking this recording and breaking it down into a video quiz. And embedding certain questions, because I want to make sure that folks are staying and watching the full length of the recording. Y'all sat through this full presentation, so I want to make sure that we're being fair on attendance. So that will come up within the next probably, and it will come directly to your email in a follow-up, just how this one was received from the Triton Transfers inbox. And I can include some of those resources as well in those. That was 2 of the questions. So that's here as a philosophy major. Do I just follow the same things? So next week, we'll talk more about themes. But essentially, the steps to accessing research are going to be the same. Do you have any programs that are of interest to you? And then figuring out when to apply to those. And then you're writing faculty emails. So yes, essentially, it will be very, very similar. But we're going to address like some of your skills and building your research resume and how to send an email to a faculty and appeal to them with your area of interest. That's where some of that language will change, but the process of accessing research will be the same for you, regardless if you're a STEM major, an English major, anthropology major. It'll look very similar. When I'm talking about research passions or interdisciplinary interests, would that be available by networking with faculty members rather than applying to programs? No. So programs will accept you doing research of any kind, with the caveat of if it's a research program. So like Edgar's program that he spoke on today was specific to STEM. So research in that program is going to have to be specific to your area. Granted, if you're a chemical engineering major, but you're more interested in a chem professor's area of interest, you could still do that research under that area. But like the faculty mentor program is one of those research opportunities that offers 199. And that's, it encourages you to pursue your area of passion. Even there's one professor who I've had many students use as a mentor, and he's philosophy and engineering major. His last name is Danks, D-A-N-K-S. And he's someone who has like 2 totally opposite areas of study that he has a PhD, I believe, in both, and he ties them in together. So you can still do that through programs. Programs, essentially, you should see programs as your method of getting paid for the work that you're doing. And you'll have to find a program that aligns with the work that you're doing in terms of cost.
So if you want to go into get a PhD, research is pretty important. You probably want to start that research right away, like your junior year, I imagine.
Yeah, and I would say it's important, especially if you want to get a PhD. It's going to teach you the skills of how to, like a PhD, essentially you're going to take a few classes in the beginning and then be sent off to do a full dissertation on your own. So it's going to give you some really good ideas of how to start that research process. So yeah, if you're someone who's interested in being a full-time researcher or you want a PhD, I would say tap in as soon as possible, and we'll get to like how to write those faculty emails, but that's something to directly include. You want to say like, hey, I'm interested in pursuing my PhD. I really want to hop into research as soon as possible. So yes, great question. I see the next question in the chat. Is networking only done through email? Can it be done in person? And if so, what's the best approach? So our third session is going to be all about faculty networking. Email is a great way. We also can talk about staying for faculty office hours. We can also talk about going to faculty office hours for someone whose class you're not taking. And also your provosts are going to be a great way of networking. I'll talk more about what those are and how to use them. Essentially, your provost is the head of all things academics and research for your college, and they're an active faculty. But if you come to all three of the sessions or you do the makeups, we're having a faculty networking not dinner, but like appetizers in fall. And we're gonna teach you in our last session kind of how to start those conversations and to make small talk and how to invite professors or ask professors for more opportunities. And then the event will be an option to talk to your provost and talk to some of the faculty that they invite who we know will have some openings for transfer students. But yes, networking in person is done great as well. Our student presenter who's going to talk about her experience got her whole research through going to office hours, as did another one of our peer coaches. So we'll talk a lot about that and how to do so in a way that makes sense. And I see some more questions coming in. So if you want to do research that's not in your department, would you be able to do so, and how would you find and reach out to them? So again, next week, we're really going to deep dive into the how to reach out to them. I have an email template. We'll talk about how to do so, but I want to make sure that before you do so, you know how to set up a resume and write a professional email and tie in reading some of their research papers, because those are all important aspects of that reach out. But you can, and we'll give you some tools of where to look for research topics and themes. And I have some portals that we'll deep dive into next week. And let's see. When do research programs start, and when should we start reaching out to professors and applying? So research programs are offered in all 4 quarters of the year. So typically summer applications come early. For summer, you're going to tend to apply in winter. For fall, they would come end of summer. Realistically, for incoming transfer students, likely fall of this quarter is not going to be a good chance. I would say wait until winter quarter and then spend your fall networking to then apply for winter programs. To figure out the quarter pace and also network with faculty, it's a lot to start research this fall quarter. So likely, I think you'll want to start applying to programs this fall and winter quarter. If you want to do winter research, you'll need to start in fall applying. And then if you want to do summer research, winter is going to be your big application time. There will be some programs that open their application over summer for fall. There's only 2 that are offered in fall. I don't know if one's on hold. And I can talk to that a little bit more, but usually it's a lot of pressure to start right away in the fall. So I'd say give yourself until fall winter quarter. And is there a set day or time when we can start applying? Let me give you one link. So I'll share my screen. So if you go to the Undergraduate Research Hub website, I shared that programs menu, which is all UCSD. This should give you some time estimates of when each program opens and closes. Do we have that here? Application opens fall or summer. So you can get a good idea here. Application closes. If you scroll far enough, you'll see a good estimate. So what I might start doing this summer, this is when you're going to have some extra time. I would start making a research wish list and say, McNair is my #1 program. This is my 2nd program. This is my 3rd program. And then start writing down when these open. And you'll be able to get a pretty decent idea of when things open and close. There's also kind of a cheat way you can do this, but if you go to any of the, ignore all these different pieces, but this link here shows you all of the current openings for undergraduate research applications that are run through URH. So granted, this isn't gonna, if there's a bio-specific research program, the application won't show here, but most programs do tend to be run, and our scholarships are run through the undergraduate research hub. So this gives you a chance to see what's open. It breaks down the reward, it will tie to the link. So nothing is open right now, but you could hyperlink this and then check. Sorry, I realize I private messaged that to someone who private messaged me, let you get the real chat. But this could be something that you check back every once in a while, because sometimes a scholarship will open and it won't be like formally announced. Another great thing to do is to sign up for the Undergraduate Research Hub's newsletter. And here would be the link to do that, but that will let you know when programs open, and they'll post for other research programs, not just Undergraduate Research Hub's programs and scholarships as well. I keep saying programs, but you can include scholarships into that. I've grouped the two. Great questions. I know we're running low on time, so people have to go. You're welcome to. If there's other questions, I'm happy to stay an extra few minutes. I hope this was helpful. I know it's a lot of information. So hopefully, if you have any questions that come after, know we have 2 more sessions and we'll be deep diving into some of the other questions you mentioned. Next week's going to be research topics, groups and areas, and then best practices for faculty networking, both in person and over email. So that's all I have for y'all today. I'll stick around for any questions that y'all might have. No problem.